Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode number 347. The one where the old men in funny hats are determined that you shall never listen to. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
I'm getting over bronchitis.
Oh, I'm glad you're feeling better.
I am feeling better, much better. I'm a lot better, actually.
You don't sound...
Cough-wise, I'm better this weekend than I was last weekend when we recorded last week's show.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. Hopefully keep the coughing fits down tonight. Last week I was a lot of that. How about you guys?
I had a great week. I didn't work all week.
Oh, were you off all this week?
I was off all week.
That's right. You said last week you were taking this week off.
Yeah. Some nice daddy-daughter time.
Just hang out with
Hang out
Gemma?
on the couch. I think this was the most... Well, I don't want to say lazy because I obviously wasn't because I was taking care of Gemma. But the least busy of my staycations I've ever had. Since, at least since we've bought the house. I watched the rest of Iron Fist. And I enjoyed it. It's very different from the rest of the Netflix series, but it's not bad. I mean, Danny as a character is kind of stupid and makes bad decisions. but I didn't think the storytelling was bad. It was just a different approach. Had they started with it, maybe, it wouldn't have been lauded as the success that Daredevil is, obviously.
Right.
And there wasn't the big, amazing fight sequences that any of the other shows had, but... This, as far as storytelling and getting us to, I think, where we need to be for the Defenders, I thought it was enjoyable. And then I also watched quite a few movies. I watched Split.
Oh, the
M. Night Shyamalan.
Shamalama Ding Dong. How was it?
Which, it was fairly good. Which is someone who has not enjoyed, who gave up on him after Signs and The Village. That's a pretty high praise, the fact that I enjoyed his film. We also watched King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I kind of agree
raspberry for that one.
With Sean's review of that, and the Guy Ritchie aspect of the movie would have made a great Robin Hood, and the rest not so much. Another one I watched was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, the guy who did Class. Wow, that is a powerful film. Really, really good.
Monster Calls is the one with Liam Neeson as the voice of the monster. And
the giant tree monster.
Okay.
Yeah. It is emotional, so you have to be kind of in the right mindset to watch it because it is very, very... It's heavy. It's so well done. The monster isn't overused. There's a little bit more of it than the Labyrinth and Pan's Labyrinth, but it's kind of on that scale because he's not the thrust of what's going on. He is the calling to help this kid cope with what's happening. It's so well done. And the last one I watched was John Wick. I did not get to John Wick 2. So
the fact that you haven't returned John Wick 2 kind of tells me a little bit about it.
I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was as amazing as everyone said it was.
Really?
Yeah, it was an enjoyable flick, but I didn't think it was, holy crap, that was the best action flick of the past 10 years. What'd you do, Sean?
Not much. Bill and I got a few more episodes of Star Trek in this week. I had Shy a lot. She's sick. She's also got the starting of bronchitis. I blame Glenn. Mel and I woke up sick after we discovered she was sick, which I don't think we're really sick. I think it's more sinuses on our end.
On Tuesday, Sean and Mel and Dave and...
oh, you were going to bring that
up. Carmen, who's the lead actress in our short film, went to Kansas City and for the Film Festival Awards, and our little movie took home Best Editing and Best Use of Prop.
So you didn't get to go since you weren't feeling well?
I did go.
I went to. I didn't hear you say you and them.
I did watch some movies this week. Since I was off Labor Day and Tuesday, I took Tuesday off to go to the films, and then of course I was off on Friday because of the illness. But I watched Batman and Bill, which is a documentary on Hulu now.
It's on Hulu. That's why I couldn't find it.
It is on Hulu. And it's,
I was looking for it on Netflix. After you told me, I was like, I don't remember the name of this, but I'm sure it's here somewhere. No. Never mind.
And it's it starts by following an author who has written several different books on kind of the behind the scenes of comic books and stuff like this. And if you don't know, for years it's been postulated that a man named Bill Fingers actually co-created Batman with Bob Kane. But Bob Kane got all the credit. And so this author, Mark Tyler Nobleman, who's been writing books, has been trying to uncover the truth behind Bill Finger and whether all of this was real. And apparently there was a recording at a New York comic convention in the 1970s with Bill Finger that was kind of brought all of this to light. Anyway, the movie it's a documentary, and it follows this author trying to uncover more information about Bill Finger and try to get basically the credit that he believes that he's due. And I can't go too much further talking about it because it really kind of unfolds as it goes. That led me to another documentary, which is called Becoming Bond, which is, I believe that's also, I think that's also on Hulu.
Yeah, that's why I haven't watched that one yet.
It's basically the George Lazenby story. It's his life leading up to him becoming Bond. He started out as a used car salesman in Australia, went to the UK because he was chasing a girl that he was in love with, and became a model there, and then stumbled into the part of James Bond. And it's a documentary, but he's telling the story the whole time. It's actually George Lazenby. He sits there on camera and tells the story. But there must not be a lot of footage or other things of his life prior to Bond, because they did hire actors to kind of act out, dramatize his life as he's telling the story. And it's quite interesting. I already knew a lot about George Lazenby, and what I thought I knew about George Lazenby was just a drop in the bucket of what this man went through. It is quite an interesting story. Another one that I would highly recommend. And then the last thing that I did this week, I actually started my countdown to Halloween, because as everybody knows, the day after Labor Day kicks off the Halloween season. So I went a little crazy this year.
You're so wrong.
I went a little crazy this year. I had heard on the Purple Stuff podcast, which is a terrific podcast if you like schlocky 80s stuff, especially schlocky 80s and 90s stuff, and horror films and stuff like that. They were talking about one of the cars. They did a countdown, but they did their top 10 favorite pop culture cars, but it couldn't be like mainstream stuff. So they couldn't do like the DeLorean or the Dukes of Hazzards generally, or they couldn't do things like that. They had to kind of dig deep and find the best of the kind of subversive type stuff. And one of the guys had come up with the car in the Wraith. And it occurred to me, they were talking about it, and it occurred to me I had never seen The Wraith. So I went to Netflix, looked up The Wraith, and it's on there, and I watched it. And it is a really campy, cheesy 1980s movie that I couldn't believe I had never seen. But it's just sort of stars Charlie Sheen. And by sort of, he's really not even in the first half of the movie much. He does kind of have a more dominant role later on in the series, and in the movie. And it makes sense why, the way that it's placed together. But I can't say that I would recommend it to anybody that wasn't maybe... I appreciated the nostalgia of it, you know what I mean? Just because it's done in the 1980s, late 1980s or so. But it's an okay movie. Anyway, but it's always been kind of categorized as a horror film. And I can see where it is, but it's really more of a sci-fi thing to me. So I don't know if it really counted as a countdown.
It's called The Wraith?
It's called The Wraith. It's got Charlie Sheen.
I don't know that I'm familiar with that one at all.
And that's probably the only actor in it that I even recognize. Oh, no, Randy Quaid is also, he plays the sheriff. So.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. And really cheesy sheriff, small town sheriff. Oh, it was bad. And then last night, my big movie watch along because every year I pick up kind of a theme to do for Countdown to Halloween, is this year I decided I'm going to go back and watch all the Friday the 13th films, because I haven't seen a lot of those for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And I decided to bring Caitlin on board. So Caitlin and I last night watched the first Friday the 13th.
Well, there's one other thing we all did this week. Shall we discuss that now?
Yes, let's.
We all went to TopCon.
We did?
We did.
Yeah. What'd you guys think?
I went to TopCon.
How was your experiences?
I love Gypsy. I love TopCon. I was very disappointed with this year. I feel almost like it was a step backward. I was really looking forward to the new venue. I thought getting out of the Ramada downtown and getting over into the Expo Center was going to be just a great leap forward for them. I did not know that it was at Ag Hall, which is not a leap forward.
No.
Ag Hall's kind of that. I think everybody has that one venue in town that you hold things at when you can't have a venue anywhere else. Ag Hall's kind of like that here for Topeka.
Well, there's some places that, or some venue or events that the Ag Hall's perfect for, like the Friends of the Library
Friends of the Library Book Sale. Absolutely, that fits
Festival
there.
of Trees.
Festival of Trees, perfect place for it. The exhibition floor for TopCon, it was fine. It was the panel aspect of it being at Ag Hall does not work.
Well, and
at
even
all.
the vendor, using that as the vendor area, it
seemed
felt
smaller.
smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, it was well laid out, and it was very easy to browse, which was kind of nice, as opposed to kind of in some of the previous years where, because of how the Ramada had screwed things up, they had some vendors here and some vendors here, and back and forth. So being able to see it all was nice, but it almost harkened back to year one, where it was kind of the one room and that was it. I mean, there just didn't really seem like there was much there, and it didn't seem like there was much variety from the vendor standpoint.
Yeah.
Compounding that was the problem that there wasn't a separate room for the panels. And so Keith and I sat in on the Deep Roy panel, and you couldn't hear it. I mean, just the ambient noise of all of that room, and then having a mic and a couple of speakers in the back corner that didn't cut it.
At all.
And so that was rather unfortunate. I still want to support it. I still want to support TopCon as an event and TopCon as a Topeka thing, and I think it's great that we have it, and I want to see it succeed. I want to see it get bigger. This really, maybe not a step back, but it felt like a sidestep at most.
Also, walking around the venue, there was not near as many vendors this year.
Mm-hmm.
There were only a few places where you really could buy stuff or look at merchandise. So I was a little down on that. I think part of that is because so many people complained last year that over 3 days it wasn't worth it for them to have a slow Friday and a slow Sunday. The Saturday that does have a good number of people isn't enough for them. So I think a lot of vendors kind of shied away this year. So I was a little disappointed with that as well. But
Even when we went Saturday, which was, we stayed for about an hour walking the floor. We went around it twice and had Gemma dressed up in a little Wonder Woman outfit and got stopped quite a bit for, oh, how cute is she? And even then, we walked the floor twice and it was only an hour and left. And that was probably the peak part of the day because it was around the noon time. So it was, kind of disappointing in general. Did see Chris, though, both Saturday and Sunday. Nice to meet up with him and talk with him again. Saw Eric Red Dalek from a distance on Saturday, but didn't get a chance to talk to him.
I talked to him today.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And of course, we got to talk to Lisa from Time Eddie, which was kind of nice to catch up with her briefly and talk about how excited we are about next month.
So that's a definite plus, is getting to meet up with everybody that we get to talk to on a semi-annual basis. It seems like seeing old friends at these things is always the highlight of them.
Agreed.
Anything else about TopCon?
I don't think so.
Well, our first bit of news is that Class has officially been canceled. ABC has dropped the act.
Boo!
Glenn's
being very quiet.
Quite a I'm a bit more disappointed since there was such a cliffhanger.
I sit here because number one, I'm not surprised at all.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. It's not surprising.
To me, it's not news. But on the flip side, I'm on the fence of that because it was just a month ago when we reviewed it, or 2 months ago when we reviewed it, and I was telling you guys, don't be discouraged yet. It hasn't got the nail in the coffin. Well, here's the nail in the coffin.
This is the nail. So.
Unfortunately, I can't say that I was surprised. I think the only thing that upsets me is the fact that it was left on a cliffhanger ending, and if there's not some way to resolve that, I'm a bit disappointed by that. Overall, I wasn't wowed by the series. It was okay, but I would like some closure, or and I think
some
you had one time
resolution.
Talked about him writing it.
I had
about writing
speculated
a book.
that he never mentioned it, but I thought he should because
maybe that's what
they did Class books when they were starting the series.
Oh, did they?
And then he's obviously a novelist.
Well, they might commission somebody even to do it, to just kind of close out that storyline. So.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. James mentioned in a pseudo-related note, he did not get to watch Class, but in his opinion, he doesn't think Doctor Who spin-offs work because of the nature of the fact of it being a spin-off of Doctor Who. I mean, Doctor Who, his name's in the title. You know what this show is, or who the show is about. So now you're going to do a show that's in that universe but doesn't feature the Doctor. You kind of are already running up against this barrier of, well, how are you going to make that work? And I think they've had some success with varying degrees on the other spinoffs. But when you, I mean, because Class is what, the 6th technical spinoff that we've had now? If you count K9 and Company, and Sarah Jane, and Torchwood, and so Class,
4th.
That's 4.
Do you count the K9 series?
The
CBBC?
The CBBC, yeah.
I don't know that you can, since it's not set in the universe.
See, I don't know if I agree with his statement, because look at how many spin-offs Big Finish has done off Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Not featuring the Doctor.
And we haven't really got to any of those yet, so I can't...
But they've been going long enough, obviously.
But let's be fair. Big Finish number
fans.
1 has a smaller audience than the BBC, because the BBC is relying on people that aren't necessarily fans. They're also relying on mainstream viewers, which even if you're a mainstream viewer, the theory is sound, because if Doctor Who's not in it and it's a Doctor Who spinoff, then you're only going to have Doctor Who fans that are seeking it out because of, peripheral characters or peripheral events or peripheral things about it that will be somewhat Doctor Who. So he's absolutely right in that perspective. With Big Finish, it's already a built-in audience. Big Finish listeners are a certain type of listener, and then the majority of them are Doctor Who fans, at least in the Doctor Who universe realm.
Yeah.
So they're the people that already were going to gravitate to a Class or gravitate to a Torchwood or gravitate to a Sarah Jane Adventures. So that's like taking fans and saying, okay, this is why. Now, you can argue that fans probably went over to Class and it wasn't quite what they expected, and maybe that also led to it. But you have to look at the big picture of they're trying to get people that aren't necessarily what you would call a Doctor Who fan. This is the average audience, and that's what's not working. Where it works with Doctor Who, because Doctor Who, that's part of the title character. The Doctor's in the title. They're going to go to it because, hey, I know this and I'm familiar with it and I like this, even if I'm not a huge fan of Doctor Who fandom. And so, yes, that applies there. I think it's apples to oranges if you try to compare Big Finish.
True.
There's also some truth to the fact that with all of the Big Finish stuff, whether it's Gallifrey or Jago and Lightfoot or the unit box sets, that they are dealing with established characters who have shown up in Doctor Who. And that's something that all the other spin-offs did. We had Sarah Jane, we had Captain Jack, we had characters from Doctor Who that are now leading their own show. And Class didn't have that, so they had that extra hurdle to get over
Had
as well.
it been a Vastra and Jenny show, it might have been a little different.
Yeah.
And very much so the reason why the Doctor is in the first episode of Class.
Yes,
I think that they recognized that. They said, okay, this has to be
This has to be here to do that. So.
And then I think ultimately where they were going with it by having the Weeping Angels show up, spoilers, at the very end, I think if you could have had angels in this early on, they might have had more people that gravitates to Doctor Who and came to that and said, this is familiar, this is from Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But I think they were a bit too late. They were a bit too early with the Doctor showing up, and they were a bit too late with the angels showing up.
Yeah, the problem with that is if the angel is shut up right after or on the heels of the Doctor showing up, and you've only got 8 episodes. So if you had the Weeping Angels in there as well, even the threat of them being early, I think a lot of people would have just been, you're just picking up the leftovers. And
I think you could have done it differently, though. I think you could have started it off with the Weeping Angels and had the Doctor show up much later in the series. I wouldn't want him
for the finale.
I wouldn't want him to fix the problem, because that was one of the things we complained about in the first episode is the Doctor shows up and just fixes everything, which works better for the Doctor to show up in the first episode when you've got a bunch of inexperienced kids that aren't used to this yet. Yeah, the Doctor shows up once, and this is your one time. The rest of these, you're on your own. So that sort of works. But I think if you would have applied the angels early, then you wouldn't have had that, this is just leftovers from the Doctor being on the...
Yeah, possibly. So, but yeah, I mean, we disappointed, yes. Surprised, not so much.
No, not surprised at all. Another bit of news. January 2018, James Goss has novelized a never-produced Douglas Adams story. Doctor Who and the Cricket Man.
Yeah, Cricket
Coming
Man.
out in hardcover.
Actually, I saw that. That was rumored a few weeks, maybe a month ago, when they were talking about some of the Pirate Planet and all that stuff, and what's next for the Douglas Adams stuff, and that was one of the things that was kind of being bantered around there. So that's a done deal now.
It is coming out according to the official Doctor Who website.
Now, I don't know how much that will really tie into the Hitchhiker's universe, because Douglas Adams actually used the Cricket Men. I think he submitted a story that was rejected by Doctor Who, but was encouraged to come back, and he came back with Pirate Planet, and that ended up becoming a story in Doctor Who.
Oh.
And so he took a lot of the stuff from Doctor Who and the Cricket Men and used that for Life, the Universe, and Everything. So there's a lot of elements, and in fact, the Cricket Men show up, and they're part of the plot device of Life, the Universe, and Everything. So I wonder how much of that will tie across, because I wonder if they'll be the same ones or if this will be something different. I mean, obviously, some of the Douglas Adams thing, the Pirate Planet novelization, is actually kind of being altered from its television version. So it's, how in universe is it really? And I think maybe you can apply that to Doctor Who and the Cricket Men, because even stuff like Shada, it's really hard to place in the Doctor Who universe, because we have 3 different versions of Shada within the universe. So who knows? But I'm excited because of the ties to the Hitchhiker's universe.
It's just great to have one of his stories that never got made or never went anywhere out there.
Yeah.
That brings up an interesting question, especially this past week. As fans of Doctor Who, as fans of Douglas Adams, I'm very excited by this news. Did we hear about Terry Pratchett?
Which, that's different.
You relate, do you think?
I do think it is, because from what I understand from this was finished and submitted. It just needed to be edited.
This was a script that was turned into
Robert.
Robert.
It wasn't an unfinished work.
I think that Robert Holmes was the script editor at the... Yeah, would have been the script editor at the time when he turned it in, and he didn't like it, so he encouraged Adams to come back with more, but he didn't like this one. He didn't want to commission it. So I think that script is done. And what Goss will probably do is take that script and stretch it out, make it a novel.
Okay. Yeah, that's a different situation than with the Pratchett stuff. So.
Yeah. I think it's exciting.
Well, I'm excited about that, especially because that of anything relates more to Hitchhiker stuff than anything that Douglas, because we've talked about the Shada connections with Professor Kronos. We've talked about the Pirate Planet with the specific planetary elements that cross over.
Yes.
This
is a plot point of Life, the Universe, and Everything. So it'll be interesting to see how
I don't remember
how
the
that was
at all, so I guess I need to go. It's about time for me to go back and reread Hitchhiker's Guide anyway. Time for a reread.
Yeah.
We have until it comes out in the UK in January, so I'm not sure when it will come out in the US. Our last bit of news, the nice folks at Candy Jar Books have announced and released their latest short story, The Cruel Oil by Harry Draper.
Harry Draper?
Harry Draper.
Okay.
Isn't that the guy from Mad Men?
No. Draper, yes, but not Harry.
It's not Harry? I don't watch Mad Men. I
think it's Henry Draper. No, it's not.
Is it? I don't know.
No, I don't know. I don't watch Mad Men either. I didn't even know it was Draper.
I know it's Draper.
So this is the first of
I'm
the
curious.
short story open submission window stories.
Oh, cool.
So dive right in and read that one if you have got it, and if not, go to there's a link in our website on our Facebook page that you can click on and click the download on once you get there and download it.
Yep, and there'll be links in the show notes as well for this particular story, or this particular podcast. My question is,
Don Draper.
When does Cruel Oil take place? Do I have to have read Daughters
Shortly
of Earth
before
first?
the novel The Dreamer's Lament.
So I do have to read Daughters first, and then Cruel Oil, and then Dreamers.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
So
If that's the right order.
bummer. Because I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the synopsis of this book, and it's very atmospheric, and it's very, how they did Fomorians last year around Halloween. And, of course, we didn't read it around Halloween. We read it until Christmas before we finally got around to it. But this one really feels atmospheric and really perfect release for this time of the year. And I like that correlation that it's, the Halloween season. So now I'm trying to decide. The dilemma is, do I go ahead and jump forward and read this, and will it matter? Or do I need to read Do I need to read Daughters of Earth first and then go to this one? Which, if that's the case, I'm going to have to get on Daughters of Earth very soon. And we're not reviewing that for now another month or so, right?
It's going to be the first thing that we get to after TopCon. So mid October.
TopCon or Time
Or
Eddie?
Time Eddie.
So mid-October. So there's a chance I could still
So,
get
here-
two
Mid-
Cruel
mid to
Oil
late
in the
October.
Halloween season.
Yeah.
So October, it's Time Eddie is 20th.
This,
Oh yeah, it'd be too late by then. So maybe if I read Daughters of Earth in early October, I still could get Cruel Oil in the Halloween season.
Yeah.
well, here's the deal. Just to make you happy. Let me go to my calendar.
You don't usually do things just to make me happy.
Yeah, I know.
Time
Ed-
or something, Glenn.
Time 83 is the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So our show would be the following week on the 30th. Or 29th, pardon me, of October.
So you could
Of Daughters or of
That would be when we would read Daughters.
So you could
review
read-
Daughters or
We
read?
will have it read so that we can review it.
Oh, okay.
That show. So since we normally
So that's
do,
not a Time Eddie show. Time Eddie show's the week before that.
correct.
Okay.
So since we normally do with the candy jar a short and the novel,
Oh, put them together.
we'll just do a short novel short, and that way
Oh,
you can
okay.
still read it for
I like
Halloween
that because we still have a short ahead of that as well, don't we?
before
That'll
Daughters.
be
Yeah,
the
sure.
two Brigadiers, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Two Brigadiers, Daughters
Okay,
Lament,
which is great because
Or,
I've already
Daughters
read
Lament and-
two Brigadiers.
or wait, what's Dreamer's Lament?
Dreamers
that's
of Lament
coming.
is the next one. Yeah.
it
Yeah,
was
that's-
released. It's been released.
Yeah, it's already out, but
But that's the next one.
chronologically, it's
Chronologically.
after Cruel Oil, according
Gotcha,
to
gotcha,
what
gotcha.
The third
Okay.
one for this season.
Keith's saying. Yeah. So
So we'll just do the two shorts and the novel.
Okay.
And that way you get it in for Halloween.
ah,
And
deal.
We'll get a little.
I'll
bit,
take that.
We'll get
I'll
a little
take
bit more
that
on
deal.
track. So you heard it here first.
We'll get caught up.
And if for some reason you don't get to it, and you have pre-ordered Havoc Files 4, it will be in Havoc Files 4.
But we always seem to read the ones that are released before we
Yeah,
get to the
we
Havoc
do.
Files. We just usually review the new stuff in the Havoc Files. So.
I'm just saying, if you wanted to wait for Havoc Files 4, you could. I don't know why you'd want to.
Yeah,
but
why would
could.
you want to?
That
I mean,
way you
you're
don't have
getting it free
That way
right
you
now
don't have to
from
skip
Candy
a whole
Jar.
chunk of Havoc Files
Havoc
4.
Files. Well, but some people might read them and then read it again when
true.
Havoc Files 4 comes
As
out.
good as Havoc Files 3 was, I wouldn't wait. I'd be devouring them as they came out.
All but that one story.
Yeah. Slouching towards something.
All right, well, what's next?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of how awesome I am.
What's next, Keith?
Oh, that's it for news.
All right. So we move on to feedback?
Yeah, our one bit of feedback comes from our Goodreads book club discussion of A Brief History of Time Lords. We're going to read out Ben's review. He says, I read this just prior to it being placed on the poll. It's a nice coffee table style book to read. The style of the writing was quite humorous, as you will discover. The pictures and drawings were all very nicely done. Lastly, it's helped me learn something I wasn't aware of, that the character of the master of the Detsen Monastery was in fact a Time Lord.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for weighing in the Goodreads book club.
And if you have opinions on any of the books that are in the Goodreads Book Club, please go and share them.
Yes.
After we do this, I will be sharing my thoughts.
It's never too late, right? Because they don't close those forums
I don't
as they
believe they close
originally
them.
had intended to do, but I think they decided to leave those open. So if people come to them later, they can still write their reviews in there as well.
You
So
just might have to dig for some of them.
yeah, and in fact, if you have read anything in the past that you want to contribute to the forums, please do. Obviously, I'm going to continue to say, and we're really guilty about not doing this, and we probably should do it more often. But read them as they're reading them as a group. Having that discussion on the boards is a lot of fun, and we encourage anybody to engage on that discussion. So
That's been... I'm going to let a secret out. That's been one of my New Year's resolutions for this year, was to become more involved on the boards of the Goodreads Book Club. And it's been one of the resolutions that I failed at miserably this year.
oh, so this was a past resolution.
That was for 2017.
Oh,
was
okay.
to
I was
be
going to say,
more-
because if you say what the resolution is going to be before it happens, is that bad luck? Kind of like when you divulge a wish or
I don't know.
it's your birthday or something? Okay, but if you... we're not even in that territory because this was last year's
Would
resolution.
have been
But
for
you're-
this year,
you're- I gotcha.
2017.
All right,
Yeah.
So, well, the year's not over, Sean.
The year's
You
not
can
over, so I
Still
still
meet
have-
that. In fact, I think we all have reviewed this on Goodreads too, right? we've at least
I've given it
stars.
stars.
I haven't put my stars in yet.
You
I was
haven't put
waiting.
your stars in?
I always wait until after the episode comes out.
Well,
before
so now I was encouraged by you.
I don't want to tip
now
my
listen,
hat.
I was encouraged by you. Just
My hat,
probably
my hand.
2 or 3.
can
Tip
tip
your
your
hat if you want. I was just
Different meaning.
encouraged.
About the book.
I was just encouraged by you. I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't know that it was on a podcast, but I think it was while we were gathered to talk about a podcast, where you said, put your review on there and then tease it to the review coming soon on the podcast, which is exactly what I did this time. I gave a little brief synopsis of what my
you
review
did a
was.
review coming soon.
And then I said, coming up on the podcast, listen to Traveling in the Vortex, and I'll tell you more. You'll hear more of my reviews. So I thought that was the intent.
I did it reverse. I put go to this website and here's the link to that show.
I wanted to give it a little brief taste of what I thought. This is how many
Gotcha.
stars I gave it. This is what I sort of thought. This is a little
That's the
piece of what I
newsman,
thought about
man.
it. And then plug this podcast. Come listen to the rest of my review on travelingthevortex.com.
Yeah, no, I don't spoil everything, but I also
I don't spoil anything.
Well,
I
no,
try
I don't-
not to.
I don't spoil
And
anything.
if it's even close to maybe being a spoiler, I will mark the spoiler button because
Good,
I don't
we
want to give
appreciate that.
I don't want to give anything away. But I always do feel like when I've read books, I always try to give a review, even if it's directing them to the podcast to say, "Hey, come listen to the review." I always try to give the review because I've always felt that Goodreads is that only works as a community if you are reviewing the things that you are reading and that you're posting on there. Because while it's very handy to track it as your reading challenge and things like that, it has a lot of other aspects of value. But I think the most important thing is to definitely do reviews of books when you do them, because at the very least the stars. And the reason being is because a lot of people utilize Goodreads to find other material that they might be interested in. And if they see a review of something that sparks their interest, it's going to encourage them to read the books that are being posted on Goodreads. So I think that's the most helpful element of Goodreads, is to inform other readers about a book, whether it's good or whether it's not, whether it's your taste or whether it's not your taste, or that kind of thing. And I think that's the best value of Goodreads.
I 100% agree with that, and I'm thrilled now that they have linked up Kindle
Yeah.
so that you can actually...
This is the third time that they've done that, and it's been real clunky the last 2 times, and I'm hoping that this new linking will make it a little more easy, but a little easier. More easy?
I'll knock on
Easier.
wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. So once I've got mine linked again, but I was really disappointed with the way that it was done earlier, so hopefully they've got it worked out a little better this time. All right.
Shall we move on to our review?
Well, let's talk about it, because we actually all read this one, and I think this is the first time in a while that we
It's
all
been a
have
while,
done a
yeah.
Goodreads review all together. We've done a few where we've piecemealed them. Somebody's taken a book and said, well, "Okay, this is what I thought of this. This is what I thought of
not
this."
counting the candy jar stuff. It's
Yeah,
been a while.
not counting the candy jar stuff. And we're only a week into September, so we're actually doing this on the heels of this being last month's
Yeah.
book of the month. So.
The great and good of Gallifrey, the High Council, the Inner Council, the Cardinals of the Academy, the old men in funny hats are all determined that you should never read this book. That's the back cover.
I thoroughly enjoyed this.
I did too.
It's a fun read.
That's exactly what it is. It's a fun read. I think that first and foremost, it's a lot of fun to read. It's written in a sort of a tongue-in-cheek manner, in the sense that it's written as though it's somebody inside Time Lord society that's giving the brief history of Time Lords. And I think that having that perspective is a lot of fun, especially since it's done in such a way that it recognizes that there is a lot of issues with Doctor Who as far as canonicity goes. And so in universe, it pokes fun at that without making it blatantly obvious that it's writing from outside of the universe. It is a Watsonian perspective on a very Doyleist issue. And so I like that you can look at it as the Doyleist and read it from the Watsonian perspective. And I think that's the thing that I appreciate the most about it. I especially like that eventually it's sort of divulged who the writer of it is, which I thought was very clever how that turns out as well.
I really appreciated the dealing with the canonicity, and more specifically...
It's kind of nice having the history of Gallifrey kind of laid out in order.
Yeah.
As someone who's dipped their toe into the Gallifrey stories out of order, it's kind of nice to have them all straightened out and clarified of what's going on when and how and why.
Oh, even as somebody who's seen these stories over and over and over again, to be able to go back and put them in sequence and go,
and especially once you get to the Time War and the new series, that's when it really helps, especially clarifying between End of Time and Day of the Doctor, and really...
And that so much of that is happening simultaneously.
Hammering all that down, and then the after effects and all of that stuff.
But it was also nice that dealing with the canosity of it, that while it was poking fun, it also... it didn't try to fix the issue.
No.
Which I thought was brilliant. When it mentions Shada and the events of Shada, and that it happened 3 different times, potentially.
Yeah.
With 2 different doctors.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of leaves it at that.
Yeah.
As if to say, we're not really sure.
It's like, we're not sure what that was about.
Yeah.
It recognizes the conundrum that is the Doctor Who universe. And I think that's what I appreciate about it most, is it recognizes all of that as canonicity, but doesn't attempt to, bend backwards over itself to try to fix how it all works together. It just, it's kind of a lay it and expect it, type thing.
What's interesting, digging into...
Lay it and accept it, not expect it. Accept it.
How it kind of... There's some things in the Doctor Who stories that you're kind of like, well, could have been this, could have been that. And one of those was, as we were preparing for the Morbius audio stories, and then rewatching Brain of Morbius, and part of my thought was, well, why did the TARDIS land that way? Was it the Time Lords like they thought? And the book fully lays the blame of the Time Lords dragged them there, while those on Twitter, said, well, it was the whatever Solomon was doing to drag the ships down. So it's kind of interesting that some of it would take stances on some of those things.
Yeah. What I found interesting about it is that it doesn't just adhere to television lore and logic. It does dip its toe, not firmly, but it dips its toe into some of the things that's been postulated in the Virgin New Adventures that I've read. It does some Big Finish. I mean, it like I say,
it talks about Romana becoming president.
Right. It doesn't delve into it, but it skirts it and dips its toe into it, which I appreciate because it gives it an interconnectivity of while we recognize, I think, as Who fans, that television is canon and everything beyond that is expanded universe. I mean, we've always kind of said that to me there's a difference between canon and continuity, and canon is basically what's laid forward by the Doctrine, which for us the Doctrine is the television series. Anything that's been put on film within the BBC realm is considered canon. Anything outside of that is considered continuity, and whether you accept it as canon or not is entirely up to the individual that reads it. For somebody that like Sean, I think you can excuse some things and say, well, Dimensions in Time does not count. But for me, everything is canon as long as it's got the BBC stamp of approval on it. And even some things that aren't BBC stamp of approval, we take Candy Jar Books, which comes from canonized material, that is spins off from canonized material. To me, it's canon. And so what I like is the fact that this book addresses that by dipping its toe into the various areas and bringing it all together and saying, yes, you're allowed to think that this is probably part of what the continuity is. And it works so well by doing that. And
by only dipping its toe into it and not overburdening itself with, well, but this one contradicts that one, or this book doesn't have the same thing as that. We addressed that with some of the big keynote stories, and then just that's enough said about that. I mean, so that you get the idea of this is where they're going to come from.
Right.
Okay.
If you really want that, then you go to, is it Lance Parkinson that did A History?
I think so.
So, you go to the 1,842 pages of A History if you really want to see how you want to shoehorn it all in together. But, this does a really nice job of saying... Or
the upcoming project from Glenn Bartlett.
Well, that was...
Complete with diagrams and info maps.
Info maps. We're way, way off from that. But anyway...
did I let something...
That's my pipe dream.
Did I let a secret go?
But I like the fact that it kind of acknowledges everything as the reader, kind of allowing the reader to say, if you acknowledge this, this is enough to connect it for you. So,
What do you guys think of the breakdown of all the notable Gallifreyans who looked into the Untempered Schism and how they reacted to him?
Yeah, that was neat too.
The one thing I didn't like about it was how they handled Susan. I don't like how much of a mystery they approached the character with.
Well,
because I never felt like there was that much of a mystery to her. I know in fandom there's been kind of questions: is she really his granddaughter? I've always just accepted the fact that she was.
Well,
and
but
she was a Time Lord, and then we later learned that she was the president's daughter.
Right. That's the thing, though. I think that had the TV series not come back around and Moffat said what he said about being the president's daughter,
that just tells me that his son was the president. Or the daughter was the president.
Well, but I think that allows you to do that. But I think that the ultimately, by bringing that back around, I think what the book does is it acknowledges that there is a discrepancy in Susan's past. And if you look at some of the missing adventures and things like that, which fandom has postulated, but not just fandom, the expanded universe has postulated the fact that maybe Susan wasn't actually his granddaughter as well. And so I think that's what it's doing, is it's again allowing the reader to kind of draw its own conclusions without definitively say some of the things that are out there that are still subject for debate. It doesn't try to nail those things down, but it does try to accept what has been presented in various different fronts on a particular character. And I think that happens once with the Master, and I can't specifically remember where I thought there was some questioning as to whether, I can't remember, it was the...
Like the nice little reference to the Robot Master?
Yes, that's exactly something like that. By other things that have been postulated or things that have been solidified or have even been just skirted the issue on.
I was very pleased to read that.
Yeah, see, but I mean, again, we liked that. We grabbed on it for the same reason that somebody looks at that and goes, "Oh, well, I've always believed that Susan wasn't actually his granddaughter." I mean, there's a lot of people out there that feel that the Doctor's asexual, so why would he have a granddaughter? I mean, they don't. The Virgin New Adventures, Mark Platt postulated the idea that Time Lords are bred on a loom, that eons ago, they could no longer reproduce. When they became Time Lords, they were not able to reproduce. They could not sexually reproduce. And so they had to devise a way in order to keep the lineage going. And so Time Lords are basically bred or grown on a loom and then plucked off of there when they become of a certain age or even as a baby and are raised and into the Time Lord Society. So it even goes about that way of saying, well, you wouldn't have a granddaughter if you come off of a loom. I mean, you might have some lineage within that loom, but you wouldn't actually have a physical granddaughter. There's no way that could happen. But
he's half human on his mother's side, so
that's the other thing that was another thing that book sort of addresses, is it goes there for those people that want to accept that fact that the Eighth Doctor, what he says is true, and some people hold that to, well, yeah, he obviously said it, so he must be. I think there's probably a 80% group of people that say no, he was just absolutely lying and just saying something there. But the book doesn't make assumptions. It just gives you the stuff that's presented and really kind of cohersively brings it together and says all of this can be true. And I think that's what I like about it as well.
Yeah, I was quite surprised actually to read that line about Susan, because the way the Master presented that story, she rattles off once upon a time when the Doctor was a little girl, and then this happened, and then he ran away with the president's daughter. One of those is a lie, or one of those is the truth. I forget exactly how she worded it in the episode. And so you're stuck in that logic trap of, well, I know this one for a fact is not true, but I suspect this one is not true, and this one probably could be the truth. So you kind of eliminate them that way. And then for the book to bring that back up, that Susan was the president's daughter.
Well, that's been addressed twice now.
Yeah.
Because
I was with Keith. I just assumed that at some point in time down the road, the Doctor's... Because I've never... She's granddaughter, grandfather. I've never doubted that in my mind. It's never been a term of affection. It's always been yes, the Doctor at one point in time had kids. He's probably had lots of kids. And Susan is a granddaughter.
I guess it helps the fact that, especially later in the show, like Ten's era, he's mentioned that he's had kids.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not... I guess it's not some big mystery of, is it really, because it's happened. I mean,
but ultimately what you have to accept that it comes down to is that at the time that Ten says it, it's Russell T Davies trying to
Fix it.
Well, he's trying to canonize it. He's saying, well, if I throw that out there, at least that gives some validity to the idea. Yeah. And so Moffat comes along later.
How many regenerations do you have? 512.
Moffat comes along later and says, well, now I'm in charge and I'm, constructing the mythos. And so I can put this in there. So that's what you have to look at. And that's happened through 52 years now, 53 years of Doctor Who history, as we've just continually come upon so many varying stories and aspects of it that you just have to kind of take with whatever...
Yeah.
Whoever's running it at the time. but the President's Daughter thing comes up twice, because I think Missy says it at one point, right?
Yes.
She's talking about it. And then there's...
The Doctor tells Clara, doesn't he?
Well, he tells Clara in the end of, not this last season, but the season before, when they're going down into the...
So that's the only reference I remembered.
Missy says it in the...
I remember her saying something about...
When the airplanes stop and the...
Yeah.
When they're sitting down at the cafe,
right.
That's where Missy brings it up.
So that's brought up there, and then it's that. I think that's why it's addressed then later. Yeah, Magician's Princess.
And then it is addressed at the end of the run, where just before Clara's dead.
Right. Well,
she's not dead.
No,
but
it's
not
in the moment between heartbeats.
Just before she's dead,
which is an eternity, because she will never die. So how crestfallen were you, Sean, when you saw the entry specifically for the War Chief? That it wasn't the Master.
And as much
according
as
to the book,
I will say right now, as much as I am here praising this book for not nailing anything down, I told you so.
I am not crestfallen at all, because
I think the book was pretty clear.
I still think it works.
This book was pretty clear. It's a separate entry altogether.
Separate person.
That's that they know of. He's a master of disguise. Come on.
I think it's funny with all of the because I don't think you're the only one that speculated that. I think I think there's that fan speculation out there, but it must not have been great enough for the author of the book to say, okay, we'll leave this one out there and kind of tiptoe around it like he does on a lot of the other elements. Yeah. He flat out says, whoop, whoop, this is a different person. And so I think...
And had it been... I firmly chalk that up to just a difference of opinion, because if I had written this book...
You would have...
I would have taken the opportunity to put... He may have been...
Right, exactly.
Just to give that hook that I'm going to leave that alive.
But it makes me...
As opposed to definitively saying no.
It makes me wonder, is it the really big stuff that is tiptoed around, or is it that maybe that is, because I always thought that was something that a lot of people probably speculated on. By nailing that down in here, it makes me think that you're probably one of a few people that kind of postulate that idea that the War Chief and the Master.
I'm going to start a movement.
So in Brief History of the Time Lords 2.0, well, we had to address this now.
I'm just going to take over for Chibnall. And then I'll be like, now I'm writing the mythos.
Now I'm writing it.
And I will bring back the War Chief.
Well, Chibnall now.
And make him the master.
Chibnall's taking the writer's room approach. So you should just get in the writer's room, because unlike Russell and Stephen, who have been the guiding hand, Chibnall is really going to be more of a showrunner, and he's going to let the writer's room basically guide the series. So if you got into the writer's room, you wouldn't even have to be after Chibnall. You could just be in there in Chibnall's era. So
that missing regeneration of the Master you all want, somewhere between John Sim and Missy, it's the War Chief. Why not? I think my favorite, other than the open, which this book has the greatest open in the history of book opens ever. And that really kind of sets you up for what you're in for.
Yeah.
It lays it out within one page, and it presents this story, and then says, or this, or this, or this, and then it delivers a punchline. And it's kind of like that in one page tells you what the rest of this book is going to be.
Yeah,
that we're going to give you these stories, and they may be true, or they may not be true, based on your perspective of where you're coming from.
Right.
And then we're going to give you a joke about it. To follow that up with the back in the prehistory, where all the blah 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 of Rassilon, which I know we had joked about it when we did the show.
That was the beauty of it, is the fact that we had joked about it so much, only to find out that that's a joke in the book.
Well, and that it went way deeper than even we touched on.
Yeah.
The joke that I thought that, we were the podcast of Rassilon and on and on and on, and that no, there was way more in there than I'd remembered, and there was way more in there than I'd even speculated about. And I think there were a couple that were made up. It didn't matter. It's totally something Rassilon would have called.
Right.
you know, the blah, blah, blah of Rassilon.
And there were so many of in here that are almost, it was this of Rassilon, but he decided to scale it back.
In a rare act of humility, he said, nah. The Great Library of Rassilon. Why is that not a thing? Probably is somewhere. But the line about, and then in typical Time Lord fashion, they locked it up where it could do no harm, and it was promptly stolen.
Yeah.
and
then it revisits that again.
I went, oh, that doesn't happen all that often. You're just talking about the one instance. And I'm going with the moment. And then I was refreshed as we fell through the rest of the timeline.
And then it happens again.
That blah, blah, blah happened. So we locked it up. And then it was stolen by so-and-so. And I went, oh, yeah. And then this happened. We locked it up. And then it was stolen by so-and-so. And I went, oh, yeah. I mean, it's just... it's like war games. Or Maverick, your security isn't worth a damn.
Yeah, it was really brilliantly written, I thought.
So there were a lot of those kinds of things that just were so well done with this book that it was a lot of fun to read. And usually with books like this, you can kind of go either way. It can either be something that's very enjoyable while still presenting you with a wealth of information that you already knew.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be an absolute bore because it's presenting you with a wealth of information that you already knew.
Yeah.
And every now and then you'll get a nugget out of them. But this is one of the former. It was a lot of fun to read, even though most of it I already knew. But a lot of it was presented in such a way that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
Or it was a good refresher course for it.
Well,
so.
and
clarifies a lot of it.
I have to ask you about because it goes right up to the fact that the Doctor draws the line in the sand at the end of the universe, basically draws a line in the sand and runs Rassilon off. And you and I specifically, I think, and Keith maybe even so, I can't remember, have always had a problem with how simple that was, how simply he just ran off.
And that was my biggest problem with the episode.
Well, it was you then. Okay.
Yeah.
But this book...
Yeah, we're all...
Okay, so this book somehow, and I can't really put my finger on why, softens that for me a little bit. And maybe it's because... it gives us more of a linear history of Rassilon and his motives than anything else, probably. And for some reason, that kind of... when reading that passage in there up to that point kind of made me think, okay, it's really not so much out of character as and I think the rest of us felt that Rassilon wouldn't have just done that. But it almost...
it helps you paint a picture of Rassilon by that point in his life.
Yes,
he would have done it.
Maybe that's what maybe that's what it is. Is it paints a picture up until that point in his life that
Rassilon the Resurrected was also weary. Rassilon the Weary at that point, because he'd also regenerated at some point.
That I think is the key, is the overwhelming disappointment that it wasn't Timothy Dalton.
I was even okay with that.
Yeah,
I
remember you having
that was the showdown I wanted. I wanted the Doctor versus Timothy Dalton. I wanted that, and the fact that he'd regenerated, and that he was no longer, as the book would point out, Rassilon the Resurrected.
Right.
If it had been Rassilon the Resurrected, I don't think he would have reacted.
Rassilon the Deserted. That's what it was. Yeah. That's what it was.
I think there would have been a much different reaction from him.
Right.
Reading this and kind of getting the history of Rassilon the Resurrected and what he was going through and what he went through. And even the idea that after the plan failed and with Gallifrey kind of squirreled away at the end of time, that he was, okay, that just didn't work. I got to try something different. I kind of had issues with, because I just, in my head, Rassilon is so full of himself that once he gets an idea, he will carry it out. And that's been evidenced by everything through... the Dark Tower and the Tomb and the Key and the Eye of Harmony and the probable... I like how they didn't really touch on the Big Finish idea that he may have been directly behind exiling Omega, that it was still listed as an accident officially.
Yeah.
And I kind of was waiting for it to turn the page and go, but we think this, and it wasn't there. I was like, aw. But that's okay.
Even so much so that the Titan in the, was it Supremacy of the Cybermen?
Yeah.
Where Rassilon cuts the deal with the Cybermen and ends up, that seemed more in line. And you could tell that the writers of that really kind of felt the same way we did about Rassilon running off when the Doctor draws the line in the sand. And so, even so much that seems more in line with something that Rassilon wanted to do. Now, I think we were disappointed with the resolution of that and how Rassilon reacts at the end of that, ultimately, when you're trying to fix something before and then you ultimately turn around and have Rassilon react in a different way than we would expect. That didn't work as well. But so much so to your point that's how you kind of expect
it. It was fixed by reading up on that and really driving home Rassilon the Resurrected, and then with the new regeneration, it made the new version of Rassilon in my head canon.
Rassilon the Deserted, you said?
Rassilon the Deserted. It made him more acceptable that was the path he chose.
Yeah.
But once I get into the writer's room, Rassilon will come back. He's I don't believe that he deserted Gallifrey. I really don't. I think he's skulking. I think he's plotting something.
Sure.
So that'll be another chapter for another day. But
maybe he's teaming up with the War Chief to set up the War Chief. He helped establish that.
You would like to have these town cabinets, huh? I happen to have a key that'll open that hangar.
Secrets to those.
Anything else about this book we want to talk about?
That would be the ultimate kick in the pants, wouldn't it? That not only is Rassilon responsible for driving him nuts, that he's the one that sets him up on a life of crime.
I don't think I have anything else on the story or on the book.
It's an enjoyable one. It was a lot of fun, and it was well illustrated too.
Yeah,
I liked.
Very well laid out.
I like the fact that they went with pictures that you would expect, and that there were also some pictures in there. It's like, where did you get this from?
Yeah.
And then some of the random CGI. Oh, okay. In particular, the slight jab at the BBC set design, going from what the Panopticon and Gallifrey looks like in Deadly Assassin versus what it looks like in Invasion of Time. Like an airport lounge with this chair. It's like, oh, that was not even subtle.
But it acknowledges it, so...
Who wrote this?
Yay.
It was written by Steve Tribe.
Who has apparently, I read the foreword, he has apparently written other Doctor Who stuff. I'm not sure what they were, because I don't think it was mentioned in the foreword.
He wrote something for the 50th. Hold on.
50 Years of Who?
Yeah.
I would be interested in tackling another one of his books if it's handled with the same aplomb.
I think some of the elements of this book, I think he said in the foreword, were what they want. Some of the things they wanted to include in 50 Years of Who, and decided that stuff didn't really work, and so he reworked that stuff to write this book, and decided that they had something else here. So
he wrote also the TARDIS Handbook, the Doctors, the Life and Times, and then a History of the Universe in 100 Objects.
Along with 50 Years of Who.
Actually, I'm not seeing that one listed.
Oh, I thought that was the one.
So he did the Time Traveler's Almanac, looks like. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think his Lives and Times must be
that must have been one.
The one for the 50th anniversary.
They had a lot of this stuff. Whatever he was writing before, they had a lot of this stuff already kind of.
I think I have two
put
of those,
together.
so I'll have to go home.
Yeah, I think you do.
Go home and look.
I have the TARDIS Handbook for sure. So.
I don't have that one, but I think
and
I
the
have
Dalek Handbook apparently.
I have the Dalek. Handbook.
I have the Life and Times.
Looks like he teamed up with James Goss a lot.
Well, good duo there.
We approve of this pairing.
We do.
Yes.
All right, well, of course, you can find us at travelingthevortex.com, and while you're there, consider becoming a patron of the podcast. On the right-hand side of the page, you'll find a button that will take you to a place where you can support us on Patreon, and any amount there is welcome. 100% of all those donations go back into this podcast. Also, there's links to other retail sites on that site as well. If you'll click through those, a portion of those proceeds also go into this show. And if you would like, you can also check out some merchandise at our merchandise store. And a portion of those proceeds go back into this podcast as well. Find a link on the website, travelingthevortex.com.
While you're on the website, you can fill out the Send Us Feedback tab and send us some feedback, or you can send it directly to feedback@travelingthevortex.com. Also on our website, you should be able to find links to all of our social media accounts where you can follow us, like us, and interact with us there.
Cool.
And while you're on the website, you can also check out our schedule, which has not been updated, but is still there.
The schedule?
The schedule.
All right, it's back to Keith this week.
Oh, no! Good grief, I said if! This week for Friday Night Who is Fort of Doomsday with Peter Davidson. And then some Big Finish. We're going to jump, a big jump for us, because we've kind of been monkeying about in the high 90s for a while in the main range stuff. We're going to go all the way up to number 221 for the Starmen, which is a Peter Davidson and Tegan and Nyssa and Adric story. I almost said Turlo. Spoilers. It's set before, so it's nothing, Adric's in it. And that's why we're doing Fort of Doomsday, actually, for Friday Night. It was a nice time there. And then we'll be reviewing that, and then we're also going to be giving you our thoughts on the 10th Doctor, Season 3 of Titan Comics, issues 1 through 5. So those are both next week. And then next week, the following week, is the Crotons for Friday Night Who, and then our Lost in Time feature returns with getting a look, hopefully, at The Wheel in Space, which may or may not be available in its recon form through BritBox. So that is another potential change in the schedule. We'll let you know next week if that's what we're going to be doing or not, unless Glenn's going to look it up now and see if it's posted. I know that it's supposed to release sometime this month on BritBox, so I took a gamble and just threw it up there, and it may or may not be up there yet. So we may have to finagle things a little bit.
Still no update.
So it's not there as of this week, but maybe next week. So.
All right. Well, is there anything else we need to touch on this week?
I think so.
If not, till next week, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.